Hello, Neuromatch. I'm going to talk about learning as swarming, or why we might want to think of neural circuit functions in terms of artificial systems. I'm interested in how these kinds of analogies might uncover principles about neural dynamics that help to bridge the gaps in current AI models. The visualization on the left is of a convnet being trained, and it shows dense activation across layers and discrete update iterations. And the beautiful two photon video of a mouse hippocampus on the right shows a continuous background of sparse, seemingly random spiking activity. This hippocampal video reflects the biological processes of lifelong learning for this animal, so it's critical to understand whether the corresponding neural dynamics and computations can contribute to future AI progress. Many people show similar lists, but I'd like to focus on these three particular items. First, dense versus sparse activation over the structure of the networks. Second, that timing matters, particularly in combination with recurrence and feedback connectivity, because those features help to sustain oscillations and other forms of synchrony. And third, that AI models are developed as and used as tools. They are not agents themselves. So these are the three components of what I'll call the dynamical perspective of intelligence, in which each component provides its own view onto concepts of sparsity. For all the details here, please see the preprint listed at the bottom of the slide. First, for sparsity and network connectivity, there are distributional regularities, such as log skew in the number of afferent inputs to neurons, that are likely to be critical to minimizing average path lengths for communication. Second, temporal dynamics, such as nested oscillations, may provide the functional layer that operates over those sparse structures. Lastly, biological learning is sample efficient because it has to be. Experience is limited, so animals must maximize the information they extract from every interaction with the world. We can think of pseudo-hierarchies like this as the structural building block. These can be combined into strongly connected hub networks that provide scale, resilience, and low path lengths. But this would still not be an efficient structure if all communication channels among the modules and layers were active simultaneously. So there must be a way for hubs and receivers to listen selectively, particularly something like phase amplitude coupling between nested oscillations. This kind of coupling means that a hub neuron, like the blue one here, only needs to shift its relative phase in time in order to select another source among its inputs. Phase shift is an energetically inexpensive mechanism to flexibly form communication channels as needed. Finally, the interactive aspect of learning can be illustrated by the example of head scanning, which is a behavior that I showed in an earlier study from 2014 was critical to abrupt and cumulative changes in hippocampal maps as rats learned to navigate in search of random reward. So my dynamical perspective of intelligence points out certain structural, dynamical, and behavioral aspects of biological learning that confer sparsity in distinct ways that are not well represented in AI. So if this all suggests some framework for addressing principles of cognitive flexibility, then what kind of model do we need to advance these ideas? It turns out that autonomous multi-agent swarming provides a strong analogy to the neural interactions that we might model for a given hippocampal or cortical circuit. For all the details, please see the paper cited here, but the main idea is that we analogize neurons to individual agents and the network or circuit to a multi-agent group. The model is then a metacontroller that yields collective spatial behaviors, including swarming and navigation. Adding a phase variable to each agent enabled a simple phase coding mechanism that drives phase-based coupling and sequencing between agents. Adding small discrete sets of cues and rewards, which the agents learn to approach, creates opportunities for sparse agentic interactions with the environment. So I used a distance kernel to convert interagent distances to recurrent synaptic weight. The same was done for feed-forward-like synapses from rewards. Note that using a Gaussian distance kernel effectively constructs a spatial attractor map in the group's recurrent connectivity. Then we simply sum up the inputs from cues, rewards, and neighboring agents in this activation variable p, and use that activation to drive the phase variable theta, which in turn drives this cosine-tuned phase coupling term that provides mutual attraction or repulsion between agents. Input-driven oscillators like this have the nice property that their phase and rate are negatively correlated, which is distinct from the well-known phenomenon of hippocampal phase precession, where the monotonic phase advance creates an asymmetry. Instead, we're looking for a simpler symmetric relationship like this. You might ask whether input-driven oscillators with this phase rate correlation can actually be found in the spatial areas of the brain. You can see the listed paper for details, but I was able to characterize this class of spatial phase coding neuron in the lateral septum of rats. You can see the strong negative phase rate correlation on the right. To drive the swarming motion, we implemented Hebbian learning using Oya's rule. The last thing is to simply convert the updated weights back into desired relative distances to drive the subsequent motion. Now we can simply initiate 300 agents and visualize the collective spatial behavior of the NeuroSwarms model. You can see that the agents expand away from 3 initial sites, and they begin forming complex sequences, trajectories, and other patterns. Remarkably, by calculating an activation-weighted average of the swarm, we can revert this multi-agent model back into a single-agent model. You can see the larger green circle in the lower left, and that is our single agent. And so when we start the simulation, you can see that the single agent is now successfully navigating from one goal to the next. And we can take the same model and put it into a novel environment, a very different environment, like a large hairpin maze. And the single agent will eventually capture all 5 of the gold stars shown here. And to just further demonstrate the generalization across environments, you can see that we could take the same model and put it into a very different double T maze. So these kinds of models exhibit highly complex behaviors, but naturally perform high-level tasks in novel environments. Analogical translation like this may be critical to finding intuitive dynamical principles of intelligence for both neuroscience and AI. So thank you for listening, and please take a look at our papers and preprints, and I look forward to seeing what questions you might have in the Discord.